We are live. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalvarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I am fired up and ready for this interview. So let's go. Let's get this party started, shall we?
This is going to be a fun one, and obviously we have to start off with a quote. And so I have one here from Angie Whelan Crosby, and she says, "Never be afraid to dive inward. Your soul will catch you."
Oh, I love that quote. Tell us why you chose that one this morning.
I chose that one as I've been hearing a lot about folks listening to the David Irvine interview from 2 weeks ago, and where we talked about basically that inner journey. And I think it's just super important to reinforce, like, yes, it feels scary and it can be something that's uncomfortable, but if you trust it and you allow it to happen, you'll find out what you need to find out. Alrighty, so we have a special guest today, the CEO of Numi.com and Zarango.com, and a psych safety expert. Steph Wiedner's with us today. Steph, how are you?
I am doing great, Rob and Susan. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And yeah, we just wanted to start off before we jump into the nuts and bolts. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started my, professional journey, obviously going through university, school, and all that. And I was at a crossroads in my career where I had a lot of responsibility. I was doing construction management, scheduling, all this sort of stuff. And sitting there going, this is not really that fun. I didn't hate it. What I was doing is I was going down to Carson City, Nevada every month. I was down there roughly a week a month. And I was the head scheduler for this brand new hospital they were building. And so there's a lot of responsibility. I was coordinating all the different trades on a project of that size and scope. There's about 50 different trades, everything from, your concrete guys, your rebar guys, all the way up to fireproofing and exterior closure, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So it was a big responsibility. And I was in many board meetings with senior engineers, senior architects, all in their 50s and 60s. And here I was, someone in my 20s going, is this what I want to be doing when I'm 50 or 60? And the answer was no. Not that it was bad work, but I found myself feeling rather ambivalent about the work. Like I didn't dread it, but it didn't fire me up. It wasn't really exciting for me. And I went back into my early days of university, or I did a Bachelor of Commerce, so I studied business. And my favorite class by far was organizational behavior. I just loved it. I soaked that up and then related subjects. So I've always been interested in psychology. I've always been interested in high performance. And I've always been interested in being part of a team. I've grown up playing team sports. And so that was always something that really lit me up and fired me up. And so I decided to make a shift in my career. And that's when I explored this whole world of coaching, started up Numi.com. Numi is a network of coaches all around the world. And that sort of set the wheels of motion that got those wheels turning to pursue a career that really fulfilled me and was really appealing and interesting in this world of coaching, psychology, high performance, teams, et cetera. And that's where my interest in psychological safety has evolved.
And what mission are you on at Numi, if you don't mind me asking? What's this all about for you?
It's all about really solving the world's biggest problems. So we have massive issues as a human race with climate change, et cetera. And so I want to ensure that everybody is living their best lives, solving the world's biggest problems. And, I think when we're in that ego phase of get more money, beat the next guy, we're not thinking big enough, holistically enough. And we're not necessarily tapping into our core values. And so I want everybody to be really living a life where they can take moments to stop and pause and go, okay, am I doing the right thing here given my circumstance? Am I dedicating my time and effort and resources to the issues that matter most to me?
Mm-hmm.
So something that I want to just touch on briefly before we get into the Twitter debacle is you run a website called skillsetter.com, and it's very focused around taking the quote unquote soft skills and turning it into practical skills that we can practice. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. A good way to think about SkillSetter is it's like a flight simulator for interpersonal skills. So what do you do in a flight simulator? You sit down and you're flying an airplane and you go through all kinds of turbulent environmental situations, and you have to land the plane safely. With SkillSetter, with interpersonal skills, what we do is we expose people to challenging interpersonal moments within a team. And it might be a one-on-one scenario, it might be a team-based scenario, and you need to, quote unquote, land the airplane safely. So you need to practice your skills. And the way it works with each one of these vignettes being 20 to maybe 60 seconds long, maybe maximum 2 minutes, the video stops and it's now your turn to speak. So you need to say what you would say as if you were in the room with those people, even though it's a recorded video. And when you're doing so, you want to be practicing one skill at a time. And just like in sports, right? When you practice, let's say, the skills of playing basketball, you dribble with your right hand, then you dribble with your left hand. And in a game, you put all those skills together. So we do the same thing. We're going to practice dribbling with your right hand. So today, you might focus on solely the skill of asking an open-ended question. Because so often we ask a question like, do you have any questions? That's a closed-ended question. Whereas what questions do you have is an open-ended question because it can't be answered with a yes or no. And so often we ask questions as if they're open-ended questions, but they're actually closed-ended questions. And maybe it's a subtlety in language, but it actually matters. There have been research studies that have looked at, do you have any questions versus what questions do you have? And you get a marketably more greater input when you ask, what questions do you have? And so that's all you do. You practice that one skill until you nail it. And with each skill, we provide a rubric. So when this skill is used properly, this tends to be true, this is true, and you avoid doing this. So then you can self-evaluate. That's a really important part of that whole practice, right? When you're practicing sports or music, there's some self-evaluation there. You can hear that you hit the wrong note on the keyboard, or you can see that the ball didn't go in the hoop. You get that immediate feedback. When you say something to your teammates, you don't know how it lands. Obviously, there's some reaction. There's some body language that you can start to read, or maybe they respond verbally, but you don't always know how what you say lands. And so we provide that rubric so that you can evaluate yourself and practice and do it again and do it again and do it again until you realize, okay, yeah, I think this is a good response. I'm going to submit it. And then we give people specific feedback once they submit their response.
I love that. And it's something we're totally aligned on the practice, and we're doing it now in one of the conflict management programs that we're running. Yeah. And it's really fun to watch folks get out there and get in these tough spots and try to practice their way out. So anyways,
Rumble.
I definitely wanted to just prime that for folks out there, because I think it's incredible, and it's putting this box around this amorphous soft skill type of thing. And I think that's part of why folks are struggling to implement or struggling to actually make changes in the leadership because of just the way programs are taught. And then also there's like a lack of this, like, hey, go out and be empathetic. Okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So just wanted to, go
exactly. Ahead. Well, one of the things we like to say is you can't learn to play the piano by reading a book, right? And yet, why are we, there's lots of leadership books, right? And so we're trying to bridge that gap from you read about the concepts, you understand them, and then you're in a game. And what's in between, right? There's very little in between. So That's the bridge we're trying to gap.
Why is this such a
The
blind
gap we're trying to bridge.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had my words flipped.
We knew what you were throwing down there, Steph. No worries.
All right.
I'm curious though, why is this such a blind spot? You know, this Harvard Business Review came out saying the $365 million spent on leadership development and training globally last year, 75% was rated ineffective. And it was rated ineffective, we know based on this study, because they didn't go to the step of depth known as mindset, where all this behavior modification stuff lives. We got a message this morning from a leader that was looking to bring us in to work with his leadership team and wanted all these different things in a one-day training on site. Why is this such a gap still in our understanding of what is actually required to be able to go through a process of change and behavior modification? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're just, it's this conception that people think they can learn to be a better leader by reading a book. You know, we somehow haven't connected the dots, right? We get that if I want to be a better piano player, I have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours on the keyboard. There's no way around it. You can't sit there watching YouTube of concert pianists, right? You can't sit there watching Simon Sinek and Tony Robbins. That's not going to get behavior change. It's going to fill your head with new ideas that will slowly, you know, fade away. And so I think there's a gap between this idea of knowledge acquisition and skill acquisition. And I think most people think leadership is knowledge. You just need to know what to do or say, and then you'll do or say it. And that's not the case. It is not the case. It is a practice. It is a practice, and we are trying to deconstruct leadership into its individual components, the behavior components, and then be able to practice those individual components one at a time. And of course, in a game, when you're in front of the board or you're at a town hall, you can put all those skills together and speak and communicate the way that is most effective for your environment.
That's where I want to go with you next, is just what does the leadership mean to you? And what style of leadership do you feel is required to solve some of the world's biggest problems?
Well, I think leadership is mainly around creating a vision, right? And having people rally around that vision. And that to me is leadership. So it's about creating that compelling vision that people want to jump on board. And we also know that one of the key motivators for anybody is feeling part of something bigger than themselves. I believe it was Tony Hsieh's book from Delivering Happiness. He was the CEO of Zappos, right? He wrote a big deal about that. He's like, he recognized that people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So he created a culture where people felt that sense of belonging. And I think that's a really powerful way of leading.
Yeah, I love that one. And it's funny, the thing in that book, they talk about someone called the customer service of Zappos for a pizza, and they actually made it happen. So
yeah,
that was an incredible book. Now, I mean, obviously, I wanted to pivot this one into talking a little bit about what's going on at Twitter and someone who is struggling to figure out what to say in front of all their employees. And I'll start off here with a few quotes from an employee that was recently laid off. And they said, people can't overlook the public mockery and firing of other employees. In the same vein, they can't overlook or feel comfortable working for someone who has handled the last few weeks the way Elon has. And the last quote from that same employee was, people don't want to sacrifice their mental health and family lives to make the richest man in the world richer.
Oh, I love that last part.
It's a bit of a zinger, isn't it?
It is. And it's, I mean, for folks, just to, we'll outline what's been going on. And so Elon Musk acquired Twitter, was somewhere around the first week of November. He laid off 3,700 employees. He cut the contractors, and he pushed out the executive team and the board of directors. He has fired folks on Twitter and on internal Slack channels in front of either the world or the internal Slack channel being in front of the whole company. Another thing that's been happening, he has been tweeting 2 to 3 times more per day now after acquiring Twitter than before. So it's around 36 tweets per day. Just to put that into perspective, he is the CEO of 5 different companies right now. And the reason I put those 2 in is he asked his folks on Wednesday to work long hours at high intensity, otherwise that they would get fired. And he said, quote, extremely hardcore work culture. And he's asking folks to be in the office for, at a minimum, 80 hours per week. Now, if we just do math here, he runs 5 companies. There's 168 hours per week. So right there, you're less than 40 hours if you split equally among the 5 companies. Now you're tweeting 36 times per day. So right there, that's taking time from leadership activities that you should be doing. And so I just wanted to throw that in because either CEO is an incredibly easy job where that only requires, something like 10 hours a week, or he's not as hardcore as he wants his staff to be.
Ooh, I love that.
And that's, for me, the biggest thing about leadership is you got to walk the walk. And it's that last quote, right? It's like, if you want me to sacrifice my mental health and my family life to make you richer, I better see you in the office because you're not committed as much as you want me to be. And you own it, and you're getting the vast majority of the benefit of this work, right? So wanted to start there. Steph, do you want to kick us off? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, I'll say.
Wow, right? That I didn't get the same reaction. I'm going to start there, Rob, because I believe that Elon Musk is an immense hard worker. He puts in long hours, and granted, he has 5 different companies for which he's steering the ship. And there's reports on Tesla, him sleeping in the, on the floor of the shop, right? And, just relentless in his effort to push things forward and do really deep level engineering, like really pushing for innovation and creativity. And the fact that with SpaceX, they've been able to do something that NASA maybe they never really considered it, but it's really innovative to take these ships and reuse them, right? That's pretty fantastic what he's been able to do. So you can't knock his achievements in all of his companies. And does that seem hypocritical for him to say you need to be working 80 hours a week? And I clearly cannot commit 80 hours per week to this one particular business. Maybe 80 hours or more cumulatively split across all 5 companies. But what you're pointing to, Rob, is that hypocrisy. And do you think others feel that same way?
I mean, I know how I would feel if I was in that situation, right? Is literally like the last person who got laid off, right? Is like, you're asking me to work 80 hours per week, and it's impossible for you to be at Twitter 80 hours per week. And then even like, why are you tweeting 36 times a day, right? Like, you're supposed to be the CEO. You should be learning how the company works. You should be learning your staff, who they are, like understanding how the process works. And before just jumping in and being like, we got to cut all this staff, we got to cut all this overhead, we got to do this. It's like, you don't even understand how the company works itself. Like, you can't understand that in 2 weeks.
And how about the impacts to psych safety?
Yeah, well, let's look at things through that lens, right? What is let's maybe start with what is it, right? Psychological safety is the belief that within your work environment, you can speak up, you can say what's on your mind. Sometimes it's called a speak up culture. The ability to even admit mistakes without any fear of reprimand. So you're not concerned about getting fired. You're not concerned about someone publicly humiliating you, which arguably we're seeing with some of these firings, right?
Yeah.
And so Is that going to diminish psychological safety? I would imagine, heck yeah. And yet what I think he's doing is he's creating an immense culture of commitment, because those who are not staying, right? Those who are going to stay, which is going to be a small minority of the organization, those who are going to stay are probably going to be doubling down. They're going to be saying, okay, I'm in. I am an extreme hard worker. I'm willing to wear that label, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to move this organization forward. I think the fear or the concern with that is there psychological safety in that environment when you have these extreme values, the core values of working extremely hard? And, is everyone just following? So the big question I would ask is there a sufficient amount of correction? Because we've seen that in other organizations like WeWork, or I think it was Volkswagen or BP, these organizations that have gotten themselves into tremendous hot water, like with Volkswagen, the whole issue with the emissions and, tweaking the system so that the machine didn't read the ratings correctly and all that, right? And that was a quote unquote toxic leader saying, we are going to reduce our emissions, full stop, get them really low or else. Yeah. And so the engineers solved that problem.
They sure did.
I think they were saying it's kind of an impossibility with the technology we have, but I guess we'll figure it out. And they came up with a solution that was, really crippled the organization for some period of time when it was outed, right? Mm-hmm. And that's an environment where there's not enough correction. Mm-hmm. And is Elon Musk going to drive the organization forward with all of these hardcore workers who are all just going to kind of blindly follow him? Will there be psychological safety within this kind of, we'll call it toxic masculine work environment? I don't know. I'm not sure. What I think with the difference maybe with Elon Musk and some of these other leaders is I think he really values science. He values data. He values objectivity. And can he get enough of that in that environment? I don't know.
I just wonder about the humanity aspect, right? Or the sustainability of the humans that are being asked to sacrifice so much. Like, we definitely know what the stats on burnout are. It's never been higher. How is that not going to impact their mental and physical health and well-being?
It probably will, but it's a choice they're making. Mm-hmm. They have a choice. Mm-hmm. And I'm not for it. I wouldn't want to work there. Yeah. But for those who do, it's a little bit like in sports. Remember, there used to be hazing. Yeah. And why did we do that? Why would a group of athletes decide to haze one another?
Power over.
It's power
over. It's to establish seniority and respect for the seniority. That's what hazing's all about, right?
But doesn't it also increase commitment? It's like, okay, I've been through the hazing, I'm in. Yay, all right. And others didn't get in, so they suck. I'm better. Yay. Right?
Depends on the individual, right?
Absolutely. And so I think I'm guessing that's got to be part of the big motivation here is, okay, let's create this culture. He's cleaning house, and he only wants those who are going to double down and be ultra, ultra, ultra committed. And like him, I guess. But is there going to be sufficient correction? Yeah. Are all of these folks going to just follow militarily like the orders of the commander in chief and just follow blindly off a cliff? Don't know.
I can't imagine.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I can't imagine there won't be fear in the brains of the people who witnessed all their colleagues getting sacked on Slack. I can't imagine that they're feeling super comfortable, confident, and safe in that type of condition. And I know that that's the problem with hazing and some of these 1.0 leadership tactics, right? Is because it does drive fear in the experience of the person who's receiving it. And so that definitely impacts performance. It definitely impacts innovation. And I think it definitely is going to impact the sustainability of the culture he's trying to build.
What's the culture he's trying to build, do you think, Susan?
Cutthroat, dog eat dog, only the strongest survive. Old school culture, in my humble opinion. But that's because I'm a Leadership 2.0 fan, right?
I'm with you on that one. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Well, so here I got a few quotes about his policies on remote work and what he sent to his employees. And he said, regarding remote work, all that is required for approval is that your manager takes responsibility for ensuring that you're making an excellent contribution. Followed by another email afterwards saying, at the risk of stating the obvious, any manager who falsely claims that someone reporting to them is doing excellent work or that a given role is essential, whether remote or not, will be exited from the company.
More fair.
Flat out, that is saying, one is he wants people in the office, so that's fine. We already knew that. But it's like basically, if you're not in the office, I'm going to be very diligent about probably firing your manager and you. And and then the other thing he said, only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade at Twitter 2.0, right? And so this is very much this element of like the command control. If you don't perform, you're out the door. You're basically a commodity and I can find anyone to replace you.
Yeah, it's very punitive.
It is.
And how does a punitive leadership style impact psych safety, Steph? Help our audience see.
Well, okay. Again, psychological safety, going back to the definition, it's the ability, the belief that you can speak up and say what's on your mind. And so I suspect that there are certain things that you can speak up and say, and then other things that you absolutely cannot. So like, imagine saying, my sister's getting married over the weekend. Can I take Friday off?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, no, don't even ask. Stuff like that. And then, but I'm really curious because I've never been in that environment. I'm curious if once you're in, does psychological safety exist? Like, do the folks that are in feel like they can actually speak up and say what's on their mind? I don't know. That's where I'm really curious because he's done this already in other environments and he's proven to be successful. So, and I think it also has shades of Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs was also, I think, perceived as a toxic leader. And so, how did he manage to be so successful? There must be some benefit to it. And yet, I think it comes at a cost. And I bet you a lot of that cost is the mental health. It is the people's well-being in the long run.
Exactly. I know from being in that type of environment at the highest level of sports, my sport being hockey, I think you get initial achievement and results in the short term, and then it's the long term where you start to see the impacts of that showing up on the people. And sometimes in sports that works because you just trade that person out and get the new fresh body in the locker room, right? And it's kind of the same model that he's describing, isn't he? It's like, okay, you got to be exceptional, basically perfect, right? The highest level of excellence. And then when it sinks, you're replaceable.
Yeah. Well, and also look at in Canada here with NHL and the Hockey Canada, rather. It's not the NHL, but Hockey Canada, where they have these young athletes committing sexual
heinous
offenses,
crimes,
right? And they're covering it up. So, so it begs the question in that environment, what kind of behaviors become acceptable and they just cover them all up?
Which is why it's a culture of silence, right? It's because people are definitely not feeling empowered to speak up in that world.
Yeah. Certainly if you are offering an oppositional point of view, right? If you share a point of view that's different from that prevailing culture, then look out, because the door is right over there. And next thing you know is you're going to be walking out of it.
And that was literally, so the one person that I saw who got fired literally on Twitter, Elon tweeted something very technical and like something about like, how can we speed up Twitter in certain countries on Android or something. And the guy who ran that area of Twitter replied to him and said, like, this is why you can't change it because of all these like technical reasons. And it was basically like, yeah, you can now because you're disagreeing with me. Right. And I know part of that is maybe he's like, well, I need folks to like be innovative and think outside the box and all this stuff. But then it's also like, by firing that guy, I think what you're doing, I mean, if I was looking at it, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not going to disagree with him. And then it's going to get into that, you know, the Volkswagen, the Wells Fargo, Deepwater Horizon, like all this stuff where, you know, you want a KPI? We'll hit it, damn it. Right? And it doesn't mean it's actually good. It just means we'll hit the KPI.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You want that type of challenge as a leader who's interested in growth, evolution, impact. Like, you want people who are going to step up and challenge you, don't you?
Yeah, you know, it sort of goes, I'm part of a CEO roundtable. So we have a handful of CEOs in our group, and facilitated by a longtime CEO of many different companies. And there's this sort of development perspective or hire and fire perspective around people, right? Some CEOs are like, I am not going to develop anyone if they're not on day one walking in the door with the skills required to do the job. I'm going to fire them and just find someone that can fill that role. And you know, I'm, as someone who's been in the coaching world and leadership development world, like that rubs me the wrong way for sure. You know, I want to give people a chance. I want to give people the opportunity to grow and develop and step into bigger roles and learn the skills as they work on the job, because I certainly was that person, right? I didn't walk out of university with a full-fledged resume.
Oh, I mean, so was the guy who believes that, right?
Yeah, really, right? You have to, you know, gain some experience somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But I think there are certainly CEOs out there who think, you know what? You got 60 days, you got 90 days. If you can't prove your worth or your mettle, you're out, and I'll find someone else. And they don't have the patience for developing people. And I think in the long run, that's got to be, you know, I don't know that can work, that does work. And if you look at some of the organizations that are looking at, you know, the multiple bottom lines, right? There's the financial bottom line, obviously, but then organizations that are starting to invest in the ESG, right? Environment, and it's governance and social responsibility and all that sort of stuff. They are proving in the long run, you have to have a long enough time frame to be more profitable, to be more successful as organizations, because I think that's the right way to build a culture of commitment where people are committed to the results and committed to the organization. They're committed because their values align with the values of the organization, and they're not just seeking profit. I think we started with that whole concept of being part of something bigger than you, right? And so when the organization that you work for is supporting the world and becoming greener, and supporting the world and providing jobs for those who are disadvantaged, et cetera, whatever means through which the organization is exercising its values, then you feel like you're part of something bigger. And that's probably, in my opinion, that's the long-term strategy that you want to go with as a leader.
I totally agree. And I mean, just where we're talking, right? Like this, element of disposable workers is common, right? Like we see it in banking, where like investment bankers, typically it's 2 years, they're either out the door or they're promoted. Like management consulting, again, it's like we really grind you out for 2 to 3 years. You either quit and go get an MBA or you go work for one of your clients.
Yeah.
Like these are, like I guess lawyers who are just new, it's like people accept these roles and work 100 hours a week for a few years to get hopefully to that prize, but often that prize doesn't make them feel better. Right. And I think that that's something that folks are changing. And even like we were looking at the stats the other day, Susan, and it was like companies that build a culture of trust, they outperform the stock or their peers by 2 to 3%
2 to
per
3%.
year.
Yeah, and you compound that. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you compound 2%, 3% a
Per
year
year
over year
for
over
10
year,
years studies.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the difference maker.
Yeah.
I see, what I see in all of that is like a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And please believe the mindset of the leader is going to be what ripple effects into that organization's growth and evolution. That's where we started with that point, right? And so when you're saying you're good or you're out, it's like a very fixed mindset. You need to have everything already baked in you. There's no development here. Like imagine I got on to my hockey team my freshman year at Princeton and my coach was like, there's no development for you here. Sorry. There's no way I would have unlocked all that potential that was realized the second, third, fourth, year experience on that team. That's where I go, right? When I'm thinking about the difference here that we're really talking about and why this old school 1.0 fixed punitive command and control style of leadership is just simply not sustainable in 2022. Right?
Because I find it interesting, sort of on a global scale, that we have political leaders that, we live in a democracy. So the democracy is constructed in a way that, yes, there is a figurehead at the head of the government, but there's all kinds of checks and balances, right? We have all kinds of systems, whether it's a judicial system or, all of these structures are put in place to make sure that one person doesn't have too much power. And yet we kind of bow to the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks and these tech CEOs that have immense amount of power. It's crazy. And especially when you start looking at technology and how it affects our daily lives, right? It was put to me in a really interesting way. When you have, say, 30 or 20 engineers at Facebook making decisions about some algorithm that affects 1.8 billion people every single day or whatever it is, right? And it's affecting what you see and how often you see it and the spreading of misinformation, all this sort of stuff that can go untested, unchallenged. And we bow down to these folks. Praising them for what they've created in the world. And it just seems like a lot of power concentrated in a very small number of people. That's pretty scary. And Elon is definitely flexing that power at Twitter. Who knows? Like what we haven't talked about is what's the direction he's going to take Twitter, which is supposed to be this open, town hall for the world's conversation. I don't know what it's going to do. Do you folks have any ideas to what direction he's going to point?
That's the scary part when you think about somebody with this type of decision making going on behind his gates. And you think about where somebody with that much power, right, could take something like this, and I don't know enough about that to be any kind of an expert in terms of foreseeing it. But it definitely worries me. I'll tell you that much. What do you think, Rob?
I mean, I don't know where he's taking it, but we've already seen some impacts where I think it was last week or the week before, he released this thing where you could pay $8 and get a blue check mark and be official.
That.
And someone created, lots of people, everyone created fake accounts and paid $8 to be official. And like someone tweeted from their fake Eli Lilly account that Eli Lilly was going to give away free insulin, and their stock price tanked.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get into the debate about how much they overcharge for insulin, but it like wiped billions off their market cap. Mm-hmm. And it was because some guy was like, here's $8. I want to do this because it's funny. Right. And so it's like, I mean, it is funny, but by the same token, it's like
dangerous.
It's dangerous. Right. And like James Bond literally had a movie about that where they crashed like Casino Royale. Right. It was like they shorted the plane and then they crashed it on purpose just so they could make a ton of money. Like, what if someone would have shorted Eli Lilly and then tanked it and then bought a ton and it's going to go back up because their business hasn't changed? Like they could have made billions of dollars for an $8 investment.
Wow.
Right?
That's pretty smart. I mean, Elon Musk did that himself with crypto.
Yeah.
I think one quarter Tesla showed an immense amount of profit. Why? Because he tweeted, he said, crypto's where it's at, or something like that. Yeah. Boom. Or Bitcoin or whatever it was. Yeah. Bitcoin goes through the roof. He sells all his Bitcoin. When I say he, I mean Tesla. Yeah. Tesla had a bunch of Bitcoin and they're like, woohoo, yay, we made a profit this quarter. Oh man, it's wild. It's the wild, wild west.
We'll talk about market manipulation another time.
We're here to talk about leadership and
and how to solve the world's biggest problems.
And how to solve the world's biggest problems. Now we have a new problem, damn it. We're not solving them, we're adding to the problems.
So Steph, I want to ask you this one, right? Is like, if there's one thing you could say to leaders out there who are navigating this crazy time, especially now at the end of 2022, what would you say to them?
The first thing that comes to mind in the spirit of psychological safety is just to be a listener. You know, be really curious. You have to put on your curiosity hat and get in touch with people and say, I want to hear from you. And it's not that you have to make any decisions, not that you have to do anything with the information immediately, but I think you want to be tuning into your folks and understanding where they're at, what issues they're seeing, how these global changes are affecting them personally, how they see it affecting the business, the organization that you're running. And so that's what I would say is just start to, it's like put out your little antenna.
Yes.
And start to tune into folks and just be curious.
I love that. And what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I want my legacy to be better leadership across the globe because, this toxic leadership, toxic masculinity, there's no place for it. There's absolutely no place for it. I think we want to create environments where people feel like they can really contribute their best. They can blow the whistle if they see something that's offside, and they're not going to get reprimanded for it. So those are the types of environments I want for everyone. And sadly, what is it? Something like, I think there's a poll, a Gallup poll that suggests that something like 28% of people feel like their voice matters at work.
Yep.
That
Not
sucks.
high enough. Yeah, I agree.
That's really awful. 7 out of 10 people showing up at work feeling like their voice doesn't matter. And how are we supposed to solve the biggest problems if 7 out of 10 people, that's basically saying, I'm punching the clock. I'm doing time. That's it. How are we supposed to, right?
Yeah.
How are we supposed to solve the world's biggest problems if 7 out of 10 people are just doing time? They're
going
just
through
showing
the motions.
up, going through the motions. They're not leaning in. They're not, you talk about this concept of like good to great. They're not, they're at maybe at good. Right? They're not giving their individual best. And so
no.
that's that's what I'd like to see my legacy be.
Love that.
I love that, of
You and
course.
Ted.
And it's obviously our mission as well. So we love this one. Steph, obviously for folks out there, they should check out noomi.com. That's NOOMII.com, Zarango.com, ZARANGO.com, skillsetter.com. And then also we've dropped your LinkedIn in the podcast notes. Is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
That's enough for me. I have one social media that I really pay attention to, which is LinkedIn. So I'd love for people to just connect with me there and join the conversation. And that's it. Thank you so much, Rob and Susan. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And I obviously only used LinkedIn as well. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. Susan's on LinkedIn, and we have an Instagram page for Elite High Performance. So you can check that out there. And obviously, if you're listening to the show, please hit subscribe to the Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform and share it with any leaders in your life. And also feel free to hit us up if you have any comments on what you think Elon's doing and where do you think Twitter 2.0 is going. We'd love to hear that. And so obviously for us, if there's anything you need from a leadership development standpoint, feedback, conflict management, psych safety, DEI, and more, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for all of that. Susan, where do you want to leave folks with today?
It's kind of that full circle moment for me, right? We started off talking about how leadership's all about having a vision where you're able to help rally people, right, towards something bigger that they really value, that's meaningful to them. I think we've done that today, right? And huddling here with Steph and riffing on all of this that we're seeing in terms of the madness in the world. This is an opportunity for us all to be a part of this A team that helps change the way the game of business is being played forever. So I'm just really excited that Steph was here today to help us rally the troops, because boy, oh boy, does this world need this more than ever.
It's absolutely true. And it's something that we're seeing everywhere. And we talked about the business benefits of, the building trust and psychological safety and all these things is roughly going to translate to 2% in stock returns per year over a long-term period, sometimes up to 26 years. So think about that in terms of compound interest.
Compound effect, yeah.
Now I want to talk about the other side of it. And there's a study out of UBC and the Heads Up guys, and they were talking about men in Canada, and they're saying that 35% of men reported feeling dread about going to work. And to go on top of that, the same or different 35%, but another 35% of them surveyed said their personalized negatively impacted their performance at work. And 30% of men were burnt out, and 36% of men are experiencing moderately to severe anger. So we're talking about 1 in 3 men are not pumped about going to work, and they're experiencing the mental consequences of this. And even that study goes on and says like over 50% of men in Canada are clinically hitting the threshold for depression. Ugh. This is impacting us. And this is the time where we got to step up and make that change, because the world is changing. Mm-hmm. This is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And not only can those men feel better, you can also make more money. So it's a win-win for everyone. So if that's not enough, get out there, get some psych safety going, practice.
And listen.
Yeah, practice. Listen.
Yeah.
Steph, thank you so much for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, thank you. Well, I'm curious with that study, why they were looking at just men. Why not women as well? And what was the impetus for looking at men only?
Yeah, so it's run through the Heads Up Guys Foundation that's based out of UBC, and they're primarily talking about men's mental health. So it's a men's only kind of organization. I have another stat for you if you'd like to go across genders and across age
I gotta
groups.
imagine it's gotta be similar, right?
Yeah.
If
So,
not higher, potentially,
oh, likely,
women.
I would guess, but I don't know specifically about women, but we were looking at the Stanford and study, a Stanford and HBS study, and it said that the way people manage others at work contributes to 120,000 deaths in the United States per year and 5 to 8% of medical costs total. And to put that into perspective for folks, that means that work is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, right behind strokes, which is around 144,000 deaths, and right ahead of Alzheimer's, which is around 100 and I believe it was 119,000 deaths. So the problem is astronomically high and just flat out unacceptable.
Yeah, a colleague of ours, Sir Kerry Cooper, he's American, but working in the UK, has done a decent amount of research looking at the leading cause of stress in workers. And the number one is their manager.
Yeah.
And their relationship with their
100%.
manager. So that is where we're really going to work with the deliberate practice components, because there's no schooling for management skills, right? We couldn't learn how to work a spreadsheet and run numbers and do all kinds of other things, but we don't learn how to interact with one another. And what makes me think with the stats for the men in particular, I wonder if men are less likely to talk about what's going on for them. I know I'm also a volunteer firefighter, and I was on a call yesterday all about PTSD and what may trigger PTSD and how to deal with it, and being able to speak to your colleagues and to openly speak to a counselor, et cetera. And I wonder if there's a gendered difference there, like men are less likely to talk about stuff. I don't know. I don't want to make any assumptions there, but that seems like a reasonable hypothesis to me. And so that's something to be considering as a leader or manager, is in your work environment, especially if you have a lot of men, if this hypothesis is true, creating an environment where folks can say, you know what? Yeah, I'm a little bit bummed. My dog died. And that being okay. It's okay to feel blue and maybe take a day off because your dog died. Your best friend. Yeah. Whereas, you might feel inclined to say, yeah, I'm doing great today, just like every other day. And I'm going to say I'm great tomorrow, no matter what.
Yeah.
So, that's the attunement that we're talking about. It's so easy as a leader to say, how's everyone doing? And everyone says, I'm doing great. And you say, great. Okay, let's keep going. That complicity, that sort of agreement, politeness is pervasive. And it's easy as a leader to miss that, to just think, okay, everyone's telling me the truth. They must be all doing fine.
Yeah, I totally agree, Stephan. It's something that I've been working, at least in my community, to open that space up, and my community being men in heavy industry for the most part. And it's something that I'm super passionate about because obviously I experienced that. And so it's totally, we need to open that space for folks because the problem's big and it's not getting any better unless we make it better. So with that, we have so much more to cover, and we'll definitely need
we'll have to have you back. Yeah. We need part 2.
So everyone, we really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.